Spiritual abuse is not something that is restricted to Christianity, the church, or people in leadership positions.
As you begin to get deeper and deeper involved in the church, you begin to experience more and more of the darkness and the abuse that's going on behind the scenes. Now, all spiritual abuse will be a part of church hurt, but not all church hurt is spiritual abuse.
Can a pastor be spiritually abused?
Yes, absolutely. Spiritual abuse goes on both sides of the pulpit.
Do you ever wonder if what happened to you was church hurt or something deeper? Have you ever left the church wondering if that was really God or something else was happening? Have you ever wondered why something in church didn't feel right, but you couldn't explain why? Hi, I'm Abby DeWitt, and with me is Kristen and Abbi, and we are hosts of today's podcast. In this week's podcast, we are going to be discussing what spiritual abuse can look like in a church. We would like to add a quick disclaimer that what we are about to share is from our experiences and observations of spiritual abuse over a few decades. This is from our opinion, from our experience. Stay tuned to future episodes if you would like to hear about how to recognize if you yourself may be experiencing spiritual abuse or how to spot a spiritual abuser and more topics like that. This is a huge topic that simply can't be covered in one podcast episode, so stay tuned for others. Now, one other thing that we would like to add is that the purpose of us sharing this today is not to vent some of our own experiences up front with spiritual abuse or to bring shame on anyone or any church where these things happened. Not a single name, even state where it had occurred, or church will be mentioned in any of this. We definitely believe in keeping those things private and that not everything is meant to be just out in the open. Now, the next thing that we'd like to address is that the purpose of sharing these things is because oftentimes somebody who's being abused or is the abuser does not know that abuse is happening while it's happening. It can often take years with spiritual abuse for people to realize that they are being abused and that what's happening is not normal. Same with the abuser. It can take them years to realize the wrongs that they are doing. We are sharing this episode in hopes to shorten that time length for people going through it, to bring information to the abused as to what that is looking like and hopefully shine light in those dark areas. And if it's someone who's an abuser who's listening, maybe if they identify or resonate with some of the situations that I will be going through and have occurred, that maybe in our hopes, it will help them to turn and go the other way and not continue those patterns and make right what was done. Now, something that we believe is vital when it comes to addressing spiritual abuse is acknowledging that spiritual abuse is not something that is restricted to Christianity, the church, or people in leadership positions. It can be found in other religions as well as in family and friends, which will be covered in another episode. Now, Kristen, do you think that most Christians even realize spiritual abuse exists?
Probably not. I think that they consider what happened to them in the church would be like church hurt. And so, if it's church hurt, I'll get over it. I'm going to sweep it under the rug and I'm not going to deal with it. Not realizing the ramifications of the abuse until maybe years down the road when it accumulates. And so I think it's very important to know the difference between church hurt and spiritual abuse. And so church hurt is just a broad term for any emotional hurt or pain that's been caused by someone within the church, okay? But a spiritual abuse, though, is pain, emotional, psychological pain that's caused by twisting scripture, twisting the character of God, and it's usually caused by like a leader in the church and for the sole purpose of maintaining power and status. And so there's a difference there. Now, all spiritual abuse will be a part of church hurt, but not all church hurt is spiritual abuse. Yeah. So I can give an example. Like a church hurt would be, okay, someone forgot, I'm in crisis and somebody didn't really come and help me out or give me the support that I was looking for. Whereas spiritual abuse would be more of a pastor coming up to a person and saying, hey, you questioned me, you questioned my authority, and so God is going to punish you. That's abusive.
Wow. Yeah, I'm really glad that you define what the difference is between those two. And I think that'll be really helpful for our conversation moving forward. Now, can a church look healthy on the outside while on the inside people are quietly experiencing spiritual abuse?
Absolutely. There are so many churches out there, as we know, like I'm in this algorithm hole where a lot of stories are coming across my Facebook feed about church abuse, and these churches are beautiful. They're the buildings are great. They have all of these programs. There's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people in their congregation. It appears that God is blessing them, and that's the appearance. But as you begin to get deeper and deeper involved in the church, you begin to experience more and more of the darkness and the abuse that's going on behind the scenes. So for a person that's just coming on a Sunday morning and not really getting involved, they may never see it and understand what's happening. But for the people that are getting very involved, very invested, that's when they are going to begin to experience the unhealthiness of a church.
Oh, wow. And then another question for you. Can a pastor be spiritually abused?
Yes, absolutely. Spiritual abuse goes on both sides of the pulpit. You can have a very humble pastor that's trying to do everything he can, serving his congregation, honoring the Lord. But we have to understand the enemy, and the enemy is always going to try to infiltrate. So he will send wolves within the congregation, so that those wolves could be planted as deacons, they could be planted as elders, they can be even family members, of the pastors, and just coming in and causing division and dissent within the church to cause it to split. So abuse happens on both sides. It's not just pastoral abuse. Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that because just for the record, we love pastors, we support pastors, and we've seen pastors be spiritually abused. And so we wanted to make that clear that what we're talking about, yes, there will be a lot of stories in here about leadership, but that is also why in future episodes we will be covering different dynamics of spiritual abuse. Now we're going to be talking about 6 signs of spiritual abuse, and as we said earlier, we're only going over 6 of the main ones, but there are really many, many others. But Kristen, why don't you start us off? What is the first main sign of spiritual abuse?
Okay, the first main sign would be deflection of responsibility. All right.
Okay.
So an example of that would be, sorry, I don't have my glasses on, so it's hard to see these notes, but accusing the victim of gossip or bitterness or not enacting Matthew 18. And Matthew 18 is about going to another person if you have been offended, and you go to that person and tell them that you've been hurt. So oftentimes when this person, the abuser, has done something and you approach that person, they could just try to totally deflect and not take responsibility for their actions at all, and turn things around so that way they're the victim and you're the actual perpetrator. They could also just assume that Matthew 18 gives them a free pass to do whatever they want, and even if they know that they've offended you, they don't need to take the steps forward to make amends because they're waiting for you to come and talk to them. So instead of really pursuing reconciliation, they put a lot of twists to things and the way God has called us to do. So that is an example. One time I was working for a pastor, and my job that he had given to me was to go be looking through his emails and sorting out his emails. And this one day, there was an email there between the assistant pastor and him, and it was all about me.
Oh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was really hard to read. They didn't like what I was doing. They were just kind of like really complaining about me. And that really hurt because I was trying my best, but you have to know this part of the story. When I started working there, another person came up to me and they said, "Kristen, just remember that everything is your fault. Whether you were involved or not, whether you know anything about it or not, everything is going to be your fault." So
Oh,
that's how I started the job. It was awful. And so just trying to go ahead and do the best that I can and then come across that email was pretty devastating. So at the time, the pastor had been assigned to a coach who was coming in to coach him, and I got to also be a part of that and have access to the coach. So I contacted him really upset, asked him what was I supposed to do. So he said, "Okay, go to him very soon and talk to him, confront him." So I was scared to death and I went and confronted him. And again, all of a sudden, he starts doing that deflection, not taking responsibility for the email. And it turned into, you should have come to me so that way bitterness doesn't get into your mind. And I looked at him, I said, "What do you think I am doing?
yeah.
I'm sitting right now in your office talking about this and talking about it fairly quickly. So that way, bitterness does not come into my mind." But yet, he was going to deflect, and then now becomes the character assassination. "I can't trust you. What were you doing going through my emails?" "I'm going through your emails because you told me to go through your emails." "Well, you're just a square peg trying to fit in a round hole." Okay. Was that supposed to be insulting or something, I guess? But it was just very difficult. But that is an example of where a leader deflects responsibility instead of saying, "I deeply apologize. I see where this is hurtful, and let's talk through this and let me explain."
Yeah, and another sign that we have is instilling fear into the people that they're leading. And this could be a pastor, this could be a small group leader, this could be a deacon, someone with a position where they're actively in a role in the church that they're usually instructing or leading people. And oftentimes, when they're instilling fear, they bring the name of God into it, which truly is taking the Lord's name in vain. Now, a couple examples of what this could look like is hearing, like if you go to somebody and you're talking to them, again, the direct person, if you're talking to them and saying, "Hey, I'm kind of noticing some red flags. I have some concerns about the leadership or some concerns about what's going on. I'm wondering if this is a safe place or good place for me and my family to stay." And if the response is, "Oh, well, if you leave here, you're going to walk out of God's grace over your life. You won't be protected by the Lord anymore." Excuse me. When did God, saying that He is our shelter, come with a map and a coordinates to your church? It
Yeah.
does not. Ever. Last time I checked, David said that he was in the depths of the sea when God came and rescued him. Okay. It just doesn't make sense. But they instill this fear. Or if you walk out from under our authority, the wolves will come and get you. Okay, well, last time I checked, Little Red Riding Hood's grandma was no longer there and was the wolf. So all I'm saying, sounds like a very wolf-like thing to say. If you're threatening people, that is not a sheep or a shepherd. That is a wolf. And so it's this fear instilling. And some of that fear can even be shown up as shunning or even instructing others to shun people. And the thing with that is people, when you're in a church body, when you're in a spiritual community, even like a spiritual small group, and you have somebody trying to lead a shunning against you, that can affect your livelihood. Or if you're somebody that works in the church, that can affect your just community. If you have kids, all your babysitters gone. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people get their babysitters from their church because, hello, people that they trust. That can cut you out from your mentorship. Any established social groups and protection that you had from that gone. And that idea of, oh my gosh, I watched this family be shunned when they left. Am I going to be shunned? Mm-hmm. Or if you have somebody in the church who spoke out and spoke truth on something and they had to go through a shunning, but yet they still had to attend. They just had to attend quietly. That is fearful and scary. And that is also very demonic, because we know that the one who is all about fear is the enemy. And so really, what are you doing when you're instilling fear? Is you're partnering with a demonic presence and ruling with fear, in which God is the opposite of that. When it talks about having a fear of the Lord, it's not an, oh, get me away from you. It's like, oh no, it's instead a respect and adoration, a love for the Lord, to the point that you don't want to hurt or disobey him.
It reminds me of the verse too of perfect love casts out fear. So if you have someone, a leader, that's causing fear and instilling fear into you and making those kind of threats that, hey, if you don't listen to me or you're questioning me, then you're outside of God's will, that's a threat. That's instilling fear. And that's not of God, because God is love, and perfect love casts out fear. It does not instill fear. So that means that pastor or that leader does not really know love.
Wow. Yeah, that is a really good point. Yes, because how can you be loving somebody that you're leading and then trying to scare them?
You definitely can't.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered why it's so hard to break free from fear, shame, or the lies you've believed about yourself? Well, in the Addie trilogy, Addie faces the same struggle as she battles deception, discovers her true identity, and learns what it means to be fully loved and redeemed. If you've ever felt lost or unworthy, this story will remind you that your story isn't over. Visit the Addie Project and purchase the Addie trilogy today. So the third one is going to be over-exaggerated sense of self, or an over-exaggeration about their power. Now, this could be a person who thinks a lot of themselves and have a grandiose feeling and view of themselves, or it could be someone who has such a fragile self-esteem that they have to make sure that they're very much in control and covering that up. So either way, they just have a very poor sense of self. An example would be demanding loyalty. Anybody who demands a loyalty, that should be a very red flag, because who are we supposed to actually be loyal to? That would be to Jesus. Yeah. And that's it. We can be supportive of this person who is serving the Lord. We could be supportive of this leader in this church, but loyal, that's a different story. If that leader goes off the deep end and is no longer being godly, we should have no loyalties there. But it's amazing how many people will remain loyal to a pastor in spite of all the accusations of abuse and scams and cover-ups. They will still remain loyal. And we have to be careful, because that loyalty can actually be idolatry. We can have an idol with worshiping a man.
You know, so what that brings to mind of who in the Bible was demanding loyalty would be King Saul.
Yes.
You know, he wanted Solomon's loyalty, and then
David's loyalty,
yes, yeah. And it became about him as the focus.
Yeah. Exactly. And that wasn't good. You know, we see that what was his name?
Solomon.
Saul. That Saul was actually, the Bible describes like an evil spirit coming upon that person, upon him, to demand that loyalty there. So also demands honor and special treatment. Those people running around in their limos or having chauffeur drivers or big security teams around them, it just points to that they have an over-exaggerated sense of self again. And it's not really necessary. It's very overdone. They also make statements such as, I am the pastor, or I have the spiritual authority. I love it when my husband says, well, if anybody has to claim that, then they're really not a leader at all. Because a leader should walk in the room and just naturally command the room and people will follow. He doesn't have to say, hey, I'm here, I'm the leader now. No, that's not a leader. So anybody saying that, that's a good red flag. There was one time when I was a teenager, and in my church, I remember this one message where God was talking about, it was either Elijah or Elisha, I can't really remember, but some kids came out and they were taunting him, this prophet of God, and then that prophet kind of cursed them, and the bear came out and killed them all. Pretty rough, gruesome story. But his take was that he was the prophet, and if anybody in the church tries to question him,
Oh no.
then we can expect similar treatment from God. We will be
Wow.
out of God's will. We will expect some kind of harsh punishment. So there goes, another grandiose sense of self, using fear to intimidate in the name of God. So
Pretty bold move for somebody who doesn't believe that the gift of prophecy is still current today, but believes that they can be a prophet.
yes, didn't make sense. Then the fourth one is their motivations are actually self-serving. So, example, we have all of these pastors of mega churches, and they've reports are coming out about their multi-million-dollar mansion and private quarters and all of this, airplanes. Okay, come on. That's a person who is in it to be self-serving, not serving you, not serving Jesus. That is a self-serving pastor. So why continue supporting that person? And another example is walking by a congregant. This one's just a simple one. Just walking by a congregant who might be struggling with carrying a heavy load, and they're preparing for an event at the church, and yet the leadership just walks right on by the person and doesn't even offer to help or give assistance. Why? Because that's not their job. Their job is not to serve. It's the congregant's job to be able to serve them. So those are some things that we can look at and go, okay, there's a lot of self-serving motivation here. It's not really about Jesus. It's not really about washing each other's feet. It's about the congregation getting on their hands and knees and serving them.
You know what this reminds me too of? Leaders who overcommit a group to something, and then, they can't do it because their time needs to be precious and spent on certain things. And then who picks up the slack? All of their servants, when that shouldn't have been committed to in the first place, whatever that task was.
Yes. Yep.
Well, another red flag, and the fifth point of a sign of spiritual abuse, is when there are undefined expectations or changing expectations. And now we do want to bring up, this isn't a one-time thing. So, for example, you're setting up an event and it's supposed to be an outdoor event, and what do you know? All the rain comes, everything has to be moved inside. Okay. There's no way a person can predict that, right? And so that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about consistent patterns of expectations being moved or undefined. And what do those patterns produce a fruit of? They enslave the people stuck in them. That's always going to be serving whoever that abuser is in that situation. It's always going to be to their benefit. And so a couple examples of this. A few years ago, I was in serving group for a while, and I love this group. It was great, but we had gotten in advance a calendar with all the events through the year. That'd be events and trips that we would need to go ahead and schedule out, and that we need to attend and either help serve or help lead. Very simple, very straightforward. And there was a specific event that typically in the past for this group, they were the main ones that put it on. And we had been communicated with that for whatever reason, that year they decided that shouldn't be the case and that the people I was in the group with, like, we could be attending that event rather than just serving and running it. And so several months go by, and a week or two before the event, I can't remember the exact specifics, the very person who told us, oh yeah, this is not something you'd be serving, starts casually talking, and don't forget, this conference is coming up in a couple weeks, and you got to be there, and don't forget, and this is what you wear. And the group and I are sitting there going, you mean the thing that we specifically asked you why it's not on the calendar? And you said it was a decision that they were going to run it a different way. We weren't going to be involved. And so someone I was in the group with goes, hey, like, I work a full-time job and I'm scheduled to work that whole day. And my, at that point, fiance and I, were purchasing tickets to go to this event because it's going to directly pour into our future marriage. We're like, we need to be a part of this. We've been budgeting out, like, we have money set aside. We've been planning this for weeks. Like, we might have even bought tickets at that time. Well, even though it was in writing and that we had all agreed to the schedule given, somehow it was a character problem on everybody who gave pushback about it instead of boundary. I myself got pulled into a private meeting. My fiance got pulled into a meeting later with me. Somebody else got pulled into private. Actually, multiple people all got pulled into private meetings. And the words used across the board were accusations that we viewed ourselves as better than the other people in our group.
Oh, wow.
And I was crushed because at the time I had been serving specifically the group that I was in and creating events and things just for them to come and rest. And so then to be told, oh, you obviously think that you're better than these people for wanting to go to this event that directly applies to the stage of your life that you're at, was crushing. But who did it benefit? It benefited the leaders who honestly just had a scheduling mess up. Yeah. And then that, again, we're looking at patterns here. So then a couple months down the road, Josiah and I, we got engaged in January and our wedding was in May. We were very excited about it. But yes, it was a shorter engagement. And we had been paid, we had paid for our wedding. We had fully planned our honeymoon. Our honeymoon was also halfway gifted to us. We had bought plane tickets. Literally everything is ready. 3 weeks before my wedding, I had gotten asked to just reschedule my honeymoon.
Oh my goodness.
And why? Not to lead, not to serve, but to be a warm body at an event, a very minor event. Oh, your honeymoon's then? Oh, just reschedule it. Wait, what? And in the weeks prior to that, the counsel that Josiah and I had been receiving from the very people was, hey, when you guys first get married, don't have anybody over to your apartment. Let your apartment be your home, establish your family. You know what? Don't even be serving on as many teams that you're serving on now. Don't be hosting as many events as you're hosting now. Dial back, just establish your marriage. And honestly, that was really helpful, really wise advice. But then weeks later, they needed more people at this event. Oh, cancel your honeymoon. Move it. Oh, I already paid for it. Just move it. What? Like, do you not know how plane tickets work? It's $600 a piece to move your plane ticket.
So it's very delusional.
Yes.
Very delusional. And it goes back to that sense of self, we're grand. Yeah.
Yeah, of I'm doing something impromptu and I need you to adjust because my ways are better than everybody else's. My purpose and my calling is above all other purposes and callings. Your family establishment is not nearly as important as the establishment of this event.
Yeah.
It all goes back to the pattern. What's the pattern? Okay. It's self-serving. The expectations are there. And if my husband and I moved our honeymoon, do you think that we would have gotten a thank you? Do you think that we would have been acknowledged? No, because it doesn't matter how much you move to the change in expectation, you will never be able to satisfy that.
You're right. You can never satisfy that. So if you even move the honeymoon, you may never have gotten a honeymoon because churches like that are so big and there's always something going on that they're needing people for and
Yeah.
kind of guilt tripping people on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it brings us to the last point, which is twisting scripture. And that's a huge thing because to keep people under their thumb, we got to use truth, but we got to put a little twist to it just to cause confusion. Some of the things that, some of the scriptures here are like honor your father and mother, and it keeps a lot of children in under abuse because the leader won't sit and actually hear what's happening. Another one is wives submitting to husbands, and that's a huge one. That's a huge thing that has been really twisted, very distorted, and has left so many women in horrible, horrible domestic violence situations, and the church will do nothing about it. Another one is that Matthew 18, go to the person if you've been offended, and they use it where they don't need to take responsibility. They don't need to approach someone even if they know that they offended that person. Another one recently that's been really being twisted, especially among politicians today, is love one another. And the kind of love that they're promoting is not God's love. It's some other kind of love. It's the world's love. But it's not God's definition of love. Some concepts that are twisted is bitterness, gossip, questioning authority, and even marriage. But that bitterness one, we'll go into that a little bit later in another episode. But when a person is hurt, it's quickly labeled as bitterness. You know, don't be bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm hurt, though. It's different. But they like to use those concepts to keep people feeling guilty, feeling condemned, and feeling very dependent and lenient on people, on the leadership.
There are many other signs of spiritual abuse, like shunning, which we will have an episode on all by itself. But these are the biggest 6 red flags that should alert you that something really isn't right. That's deflection of responsibility, instilling fear, exaggerated sense of self, and overbearing power. Self-serving motivations, undefined expectations, or moving expectations, and of course, twisting scripture. If these signs are resonating with you in what you may have gone through or are currently going through, please reach out to us. Spiritual abuse needs to be taken very seriously because this specific kind of abuse is a direct attack against God and his very identity. Jesus does not support this kind of behavior, and he is not the one encouraging this behavior. There is a way to separate Jesus from the abuse. You don't need to walk away from your faith. Contact us at theaddieproject.org, and we would love to help you. We've been there, and we would love to be able to offer you coaching through your spiritual healing and other resources as well. Thank you for listening, and we will see you for our episode next week, 6 signs of spiritual abuse in the family.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Before you go, if this episode spoke to you, take 30 seconds and share it with someone who may be seeking identity healing. Also, please leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. It really encourages us to know this podcast is helping you. And friend, don't just listen and move on. Sit with it. Let it challenge you. Let it shift something in you this week. Stay rooted in truth because that's where your real identity is. And I'll meet you back here for the next episode.